from Dismantling America, quote, "The collapse of a civilization is not just the replacement of rulers or institutions with new rulers and new institutions. It is the destruction of a whole way of life and the painful and sometimes pathetic attempts of rebuilding amid the ruins. Is that where America is headed? I believe it is." Close quote. Now, whatever troubles we have, it's still the richest, most powerful nation in the world. How can you say such a thing?
Well, you know, that description would also have fit the United States on December 6, 1941. So it's like the argument that was used when I used to question whether Social Security was fiscally sound. And I said, Social Security has never missed a payment. It's never been a day late or a dollar short. I said, that's always true right up to the moment of collapse.
While the Obama administration is not the root cause of the ominous dangers that face this country at home and abroad, it is the embodiment, the personification, and the culmination of dangerous trends that began decades ago. How does the President of the United States embody dangerous trends? How do you see this man?
Oh my gosh. I see him as someone who all his life has been associated with and part of a group of people who fundamentally don't believe in the principles of this country. He worked as a community organizer. I don't think most people stop and think, what does a community organizer do? He doesn't organize a community.
It's not bake sales.
Huh?
It's not bake sales he's organizing.
No, he's not telling people in the community how to shop better and stuff like that. He is mobilizing all the resentments, organizing them in order to put them into a battle to get what they want from other people.
Now, you talk about Barack Obama as embodying dangerous trends, quote, that began decades ago.
Oh, yes.
When? This is during your lifetime, during your adult lifetime?
Yes, and perhaps even a little earlier. But I think what you see in the most clearly, I think, in the academic world, are people who don't think that this country is a great country. One example of a colleague of mine who teaches at Harvard, after 9/11, put an American flag on his car. And his colleagues said, "What is that for?" When I visited Berkeley in the aftermath of 9/11, when there were flags everywhere, I did not see one flag on the Berkeley campus on any of those expensive houses. When I was coming back from Berkeley, the first American flag I saw was in a low-income black neighborhood in Oakland. These are people who consider themselves citizens of the world, and that the rest of us are so lucky to have them here to change America, so that people like us don't have a voice.
From Dismantling America, quote, "Nothing so epitomizes President Obama's contempt for American values and traditions as ramming two bills, the stimulus package and the health care bill this would be, through Congress in his first year, each bill more than 1,000 pages long, too fast for either to be read, much less discussed," close quote. Stimulus package, the health care bill, actually, I looked this up, came to more than 2,000 pages.
Yes.
On the other hand, the American people elected Barack Obama. They gave him big Democratic majorities in both the House and the Senate. Why shouldn't Barack Obama and his Democratic allies enact whatever they want as they want?
Oh, whatever they want is one thing. As they want is something else. As they want means circumventing the whole political system of the country that's meant to safeguard, a self-governing country. If you never learn what kind of laws are being passed, then you've lost a great deal of your ability to influence what happens to the people who rule. I mean, the thing that this whole business with rushing these bills through, it reminds me, the only thing I can find in parallel in history is the Norman conquerors who would publish their laws in England in French for an English-speaking nation.
Dismantling America once again. What are the Beltway politicians buying with all the hundreds of billions of dollars they are spending? They are buying what politicians are most interested in, power. Explain that notion.
There are things that the government is authorized to do under the Constitution and other things that they're not authorized to do. But by simply spending a vast amount of money, you acquire the right to do them. For example, you can fire the head of General Motors simply because you spent all that money rescuing General Motors. There are all kinds of programs that the federal government imposes on the states which they have no authority to do, but they impose them because they make the receipt of federal money contingent on doing what they tell you in Washington. And so the powers that were set out in the Constitution and limited become expanded by this process. It started, I think, with Woodrow Wilson, who was the first president of the United States to openly say that the Constitution, needed to be superseded. And he didn't mean that there needed to be amendments to the Constitution, which anybody can be for, but that the courts should do this. In other words, to circumvent the public, the voting public, and put in the things that the judges think ought to be put in, irrespective of what the Constitution says.
Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, you write, said that the life of the law has not been logic but experience. Vast numbers of laws have accumulated and evolved over the centuries based on experience with male-female unions. There is no reason why all those laws should be transferred willy-nilly to a different kind of union, one with neither the inherent tendency to produce children or the inherent asymmetries of relationships between people of different sexes. That's quotation 1. Here's quotation 2. U.S. District Judge Vaughn Walker, ruling in Perry versus Schwarzenegger on August 4th. Quote, gender no longer forms an essential part of marriage. Close quote. I just dropped that in your lap to see what you do with it, Dr. Sowell.
Well, the most important decision is always who makes the decision. And so the question is not what is the role of gender for this judge to decide, but since we are presumably still, for the moment at least, a self-governing nation, it's for the voting public to decide. And so the fact that he feels that way, that's wonderful. Let him vote that way in the privacy of the voting booth. But let him not say that this is now the law of the land just because he happens to think that way.
Tom, let me give you just another couple of quotations from Judge Vaughn Walker's ruling the other day. Judge Walker, the traditional understanding of marriage represents, quote, nothing more than an artifact of a foregone notion that men and women fulfill different roles in civic life, close quote. That's an artifact.
Well, one might say that Judge Walker is an artifact of what goes on in academia and particularly in the law schools. But again, the question is, whose decision is that? Is that a judge is there to decide that the rest of us, that what we believe is just not worth thinking about? Or is he there to carry out the laws that have been passed by the duly elected representatives?
Tom, you know that during this trial, he had a long fact-finding phase in which one sociologist and expert after another came in to testify about the roles of genders, the state of marriage in the 21st century, and so forth. You just brush all that aside?
No, none of that is a substitute for we the people, which is what the Constitution is about.
From your book, Tom, Dismantling America, quote, the great escape of our times is escape from personal responsibility, close quote. What do you mean?
Well, I think if you don't have a sense of personal responsibility, and what you have is the government taking money from people who are personally responsible and giving it to people who are irresponsible, or in other cases corrupt, that's not a viable situation for the long term. You're going to have ever more people being ever more irresponsible.
To follow Rome, one of the greatest civilizations of all time, as it degenerated and fractured, is especially painful in view of the parallels to what is happening in America in our own times. Close quote. Yeah. What are the parallels that are most striking to you?
The internal loss of confidence, that we're not prepared to stand up and defend ourselves. I mean, there are all kinds of small signs and large signs, but that we have to accommodate people who move here. You know, the old saying was that when in Rome, do as the Romans do. The new one is when in Rome, tell the Romans what to do. Mm. And we're going along with it.
Mm. When we put up a notice that you're going to appear on Twitter or Facebook, you are a rock star to college kids. I want you to know that. So there's hope. You're reaching people. So one sentence of advice to some sophomore or junior who's watching this today and thinks to himself, gee, Dr. Sowell just told me the America in which I'm going to grow up will be a shrunken place.
No. It's not over till it's over, as Yogi Berra said. And I would say to this young person, if we, through some miracle, get through this, please take to heart the lesson of what happens when you vote on the basis of rhetoric and symbolism and instead of using your mind. It doesn't matter how smart you are unless you stop and think.